O'Reilly. You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.
The Hunting Collective is presented by Element.
I guess I grew up on an older road.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 140 of The Hunting Collective. I'm Ben O'Brien. Say hello, Philip.
Hello, Benjamin.
Big show today, Phil. Big show today.
That's what they tell me.
That's what they tell you. Phil's nervous. You nervous?
I'm not really nervous.
Yeah, we didn't pre-record our conversation with Barrie, so it's all gonna be live.
That's true. We have not done this yet.
Yeah, so we're going to call Dr. Barrie K. Gilbert. If you haven't listened to, we'll give you a moment here, if you haven't listened to a contentious interview of episode 82 of the show, I believe it's 82, from last year, go back now and listen. And we're back. I hope you had fun with that. Safe to say, as I said at the end of last week's episode, that conversation is the most talked about conversation we've had here on the show. It has spawned hashtags, memes, cocktails. It has spawned a lot of things in the THC world. So what better to do than to have Dr. Barrie K. Gilbert on to talk about it, to reflect on it, to talk about, what he really thinks about hunting and predators, and just briefly chat with him and try to, essentially bury the hatchet in a way that'll make us all feel good about that last interaction. So I figure, why not? Phil, the floor is yours to comment here, bud.
I kind of mentioned it last week. I'm just, I have mixed feelings about reconnecting with Barrie, because I just feel like coming to a middle ground, place of understanding, didn't seem like a possibility after the last show, and it's become kind of an infamous incident on THC, and I think it might be. I don't know. For my own selfish reasons, I think just leaving it as is.
You prefer
as like a legendary thing that happened a long time ago is just it's more fun than revisiting it.
Yeah, I feel that I think about Barrie so much, and that we talk about him so much, that we should give him at least a chance to come back on and talk for a brief time, at least about what happened and all the things that have occurred since. And so that's what we're gonna do. And we filled our cup with a beautiful orange Element salt recharge, and we're gonna work our way through this together. And so we will call Barrie. We're gonna give Barrie a call in just a moment. But before we do that, I believe it's episode 6, season 2, Not So Sharp Moments. Play the jingle, Phil.
Work sharp, not so sharp moments, sharp so you don't have to be.
Season 2, yeah. Up so you don't have to be. Woo! All right, here we are. I like to sing that jingle in my sleep.
All right.
Work Sharp's Not So Sharp Moment, episode 6. Here we go. PJ writes in. He said, since you're not going to get my name right, I'll go ahead and do the thing you like. PJ is pronounced PJ Wiederhold. If my name and note is not enough to get on the podcast, I have 2 stories to share that happened in the same week. So, here we go. Philip,
Yes.
PJ Wiederhold. We've since moved, but this takes place in rural Pike County, Ohio. Living there came with some things I liked and some things I was less fond of. One of those things I was less fond of was rats. There's no fear of them, just a general dislike for their droppings being everywhere. It would seem they have the same aversion to pooping outside as Phil does. They would poop anywhere the livestock feed was, not to mention they'd eat the feed too. Needlessly to say, they needed to go. After trying traps unsuccessfully, we moved to bait stations, which worked wonderfully. Only problem was, they would get some of the poison and then wander deliriously around the barn. Even though they were rats, I still felt the need to end their suffering. Long story short, this leads me to getting Grandpa's .22 pistol and patrolling the barn any chance I got. One warm, dark July night. Well, after the dew had set in. The bedtime stories read and the kiddos were nestled under their blankets. I loaded the old 6-shooter, donned a headlamp, and made my way to the barn. As this was not my first trip and occasionally I'd happen to surprise an unsuspecting rat, this was a shoes-off situation, as Remy Warren puts it.
Hey.
Nice reference. I approach, light off, quiet as a mouse, slipping through the wet yard as if a 200-inch whitetail was bedded just out of sight. I could hear them rummaging around the walls, but spotted none, even though I searched diligently. Moments passed as I stood motionless, searching for a silhouette, to no avail. Feeling defeat sinking closer and closer by the second, I decided to get more proactive. Switching headlamp on brought more certainty that I was going to head in without seeing a single rat. It seemed as though they were taunting me with their menacing squeaks and ominous scratches behind the kickboards. That's when I decided enough was enough. I decided I'd move the feed barrel, allowing me to crouch down near the wall, laying my face against the cool, condensating metal, straining to peer down the narrow gap between the boards. Where do you think this is going, Phil?
I have no idea. Please continue.
I was thinking like a rat attack.
I mean, he's definitely setting it up with a lot of tension here.
There's a lot
it's
of
good
tension.
storytelling.
Well done, PJ. To my amazement, there were 16 beady little eyes glowing in the light, busily milling about their business. I had made my mind up, headed to the house for eye and ear protection, and swapped the long rifle out for a rat shot. I was walking with a purpose and a confidence. That should have been a red flag. Having thoroughly soaked my feet in the dewy grass, I neared the barn once again, contorting carefully to a position that would allow me to hopefully get more than one rat with one shot. I slowly, gently, and quietly placed my bearded cheek on the cold, damp metal wall. That's when it struck me. That exact moment in my confidence and certainty, I'd missed the steady tick, tick, tick of the electric fence controller.
There it is.
It was borrowed from my late grandfather and had enclosed 60 acres before powering my little 2-acre pasture at the time. Having touched both the ground and line side, the electric fence controller delivered quite a solid, jolting shock. Everything went black for what felt like a half of a second. Presumably the impact of my knee hitting the dusty ground jolted me awake. It truly confused and disoriented me like never before. Left me kneeling there, pondering what had happened. Slowly coming to my senses, my earmuffs laying on the ground, the single 6 still gripped tightly in my hand, the feeling that I'd been kicked by my horse in the shoulder, all seemed to pale to the strong metallic taste in my mouth. The electric fence controller laughing at me from my dreamy certainty. Tick, tick, tick. After gathering myself and making it to my house, my suspicion was confirmed by 2 red marks on my shoulder. An experience I plan to avoid the rest of my life. PJ. Phil, play the jingle.
Work sharp, not so sharp moments, sharp so you don't have to be. Season 2! Yeah!
All right, PJ, you son of a bee. Your not so sharp moment's going to get you a field sharpener from our friends at Work Sharp. if you get some time, go over their YouTube page. They got some kick-ass sharpening tips for you over there. So thanks to WorkSharp, thanks to you, PJ. Phil, commentary. Ranks, top 10, not even close. Good storytelling.
I mean, I don't think we've had an electricity story yet. That's new.
That's new. Not giving you a lot of credit there, PJ. I felt like that was some of the best build storytelling.
Oh yeah,
the payoff wasn't there.
Definitely.
He didn't get attacked, but like I was hoping he would get.
Was
attacked
it as sensational as shitting your pants? No, but it's still not sharp.
But not
very
not
good
sharp
writing
at all, PJ, and very good writing. So for that, you're going to win that prize. And hopefully, if you ever do move back to Pike County, there's less rats. All right, now, ready, Phil?
Let's do it.
We're going to call Barrie K. Gilbert. Here we go. Barrie, how are you, sir?
Doing okay. Enjoying summer. Isolated up here on an island, which is kind of nice. I'm doing a lot of swimming and sailing, so
that's nothing wrong with that. Yeah,
keeps me away from people.
Tell us how the pandemic has been. How the last few months has been for you and your family up there.
Oh, pretty good actually. We're at the low end of the pandemic. Everybody's going around with masks on, and including going on our ferry to our island. But I don't know anybody that's been positive. How things? I noticed Montana's in pretty good shape and going down too, eh?
Yeah, it's been good. We were in the office for a while and then got shuffled out because things were on the rise, but now it seems like things are leveling out. So, yeah, we feel good in Montana. Phil, you feel pretty good? We got Phil, our engineer, here. Say hi to Barrie.
Hey, Barrie, how's it going? Yeah,
Hi, Phil.
Hi. Yeah, it's definitely it's good to see a lot of people out in masks around here, and it's a little less anxious than it used to be, which I think is good. People are just moving on with their lives like they have to. So,
yeah, the border being closed too stopped all chances of me going to Montana. I like to get down to Yellowstone.
Yeah,
I got a lot of friends down that way.
Yeah,
but we can fly in if I want to go to Ottawa and fly to Bozeman. I can do that, but I'm not sure I'll get back into Canada.
Yeah, we've had a few people come down from Canada, but it's a sketchy experience, one that you really want to have to come to Montana for. So yeah. we definitely understand that. Well, we glad we got you, man. Okay. As I was saying over email, there's not been a conversation that we've had on this show. We've had hundreds of conversations over time that got as much commentary, as much conversation going as what we called a contentious interview with you back last year. And we talk about you all the time. It's such the thing that we talked about, predation and bears, is such an important thing. We've been talking to a lot of individuals about it. But also I think just how, what was said, how it was said, how everything ended up, everybody had a reaction to it. And so time has passed. And all I wanted to do was have you on and chat about, what had happened. And I guess my first question is, what was, after you came in and we did the interview, what happened in your world after we aired that thing?
Not a whole lot. I had a couple of trolls that went on Amazon and dumped shit on my book without having seen it at all. They clearly were offended by me. One of the guys said, I was a old man that didn't get enough attention and I wanted more attention. And he said, if you can believe this, he said, so we get it. You had a bad day. Well, shit, I had a bad life after that bear nailed me, and I had 2 months in the hospital on my back. So it was a little more than a bad day. But, I can see why people get cranked up. My knowledge is limited to, observing bears. I've had thousands of hours of doing it, and I challenge anybody that wants to take me on to say they've done more watching of bears. But I'm kind of like an anthropologist watching a culture do its thing. Yeah. So when it comes to bear attacks. I'm not an expert when it comes to population biology and modeling and how many bears there are. I only know what I read and what's in the press. I try to follow the Grizzly Bear Advisory Committee that your governor put up, but apparently it hasn't come out with any recommendations yet. But they've got 18 people on there. I imagine they got 22 opinions.
That's the beautiful thing about what we talked about, is that it does bring in so many different opinions. We went recently and visited Yellowstone National Park, and we tracked some mountain lions with a predator biologist by the name of Dr. Daniel Staler. His perspective was a beautiful one, a very tangible one. We just had Dr. Valerius Geist on last episode, talked to him about his perspective. So we've been just trying to mine as many of these perspectives as we can. And I think it all shows that this is a complex issue. There's a lot going on, and it really gets people's hackles up. And we've also, I'll tell you, Barry, had a neurologist on, a neuroscientist on, and talked about kind of, our brains, the psychology of why some people really love predators or love grizzly bears particularly, and why some people have such a negative reaction to them. And so it's been interesting to learn over time how these things come about. So it's good to do that. Do you feel like
the sociology of people's values and whether they're going to change? I try pretty much. I've read enough to stay away from that because I don't have any illusions about or delusions about changing people's minds. I just have my experience, and that's what my book was about. My 35 to 40 years experience with bears. And at the end, I try to take on some of the politics and management because I'm offended that the conservation of bears gets a dollar sign on it, and the bears generally lose. But that's just something that I learned from experience in a national park. We all think that national parks are total protection for bears, but they're not protected from fast vehicles or trains in northern Montana and a whole bunch of things. In fact, if you look at national parks, I looked at Banff and Jasper in Canada at one time and Yellowstone, and the death of bears from humans is equivalent to a hunting season. I mean, it's not like they're totally protected.
Yeah.
And the same goes for wolves in Denali Park. I mentioned this in my book that one of the research biologists there back in I guess it was in the 70s, told me every wolf pack in Denali Park is subjected to trapping because they range so widely, and when they go outside the park, of course, they get nailed. So much for conservation of wolves.
Yeah, when we were talking to Dr. Geist last week, we talked a little. His ideas, like the two competing ideas he presented, were this idea of protectionism, and that was connected to environmentalism, and then this idea of intelligent intervention on the wildlife management side, which meant hunting, other tools for managing predator populations. Be interested to hear what you think about that because like I said, we've done 4 or 5 shows where I've tried to present as many varying opinions. We have Chris Darimont on later, who tends to be on your side of things when it comes to bears. But do you have any thoughts about this protectionism versus intelligent intervention?
Oh yeah, one of the conundrums I think about is why we went from endangered status to a desire to have a hunting season in the three states around Yellowstone. It just seems to me a transition. Once you've got to the number, small as it is, say 700, 800, 600 bears, all of a sudden you have a hunting season on them. I mean, my impression from the media was that people couldn't wait to kill them, whether it's by hunting or let the ranchers nail them or shoot them from helicopters. So I don't have much truck with trophy hunting. It isn't, and a bear isn't something to eat, although British Columbia tried to have a season in which you could kill a grizzly bear if you took the meat home. And to me, that's a backdoor approach to conservation. I just think there's so much interest, Yellowstone isn't the only place that people go to observe bears, photograph them, all those sort of things, Teton Park, and then you go up the coast of British Columbia. There are 30 businesses on the coast alone that emphasize bear viewing as part of their trips, whether they're whale watching or, marine mammals in general. So I could see going to bear viewing. Now it's trickier in Rockies. You have to find a burn with a big berry patch where bears are concentrating. If you're trying to run a business, taking people to see grizzly bears, it's tough to go and say this afternoon we're going to go and look at grizzly bears. Even in Yellowstone, that doesn't work.
Yeah, that's the problem with wildlife viewing in general. They don't necessarily know they're being viewed or that somebody wants to view them. Can I ask you another thing that happened from the last show is people want to jump to the conclusion that you're fully anti-hunting, that all hunting in your mind doesn't work. Can you kind of describe your thoughts on maybe ungulate hunting of deer and elk, and then hunting of a grizzly bear? Like, what you just kind of throw that out there for everybody.
Oh, I'm not anti-hunting at all. I taught wildlife management. I wouldn't have the job if I was anti-hunting. I think half my students had rifles in their half tons. In fact, one guy asked me, we were going to Yellowstone in the winter. He says, is it okay if I bring my 30-30 and my half ton? I might see a deer on the way. I said, I don't think that's going to work. But no, I think hunting is important. Elk, deer, you name it, caribou, moose. That gets a lot of people interested in wildlife management. It's how our country started. Lewis and Clark shot just under over 1,000 antelope crossing the country. So they couldn't have made it without, granted that isn't permitted hunting, but they lived off the land. And there's still people in Alaska that basically their only protein is what they shoot or trap or whatever. So I think hunting prey, ungulates, is absolutely traditional, and I have nothing against it. When it comes to carnivores, I sometimes wonder, people with high-powered rifles that sit in trees over salmon streams and shoot a bear 1,200 yards. My daughter read something in my book, and she says, Dad, it sounds like a search and destroy mission, because the hunter isn't risking anything by sitting in a tree with a guide, and some of them, if the hunter's jumpy, the guide will shoot the bear. So I just don't see shooting a grizzly bear for either the pelt or a skull, if you can keep the skull. And my impression is those people don't have much use for learning about the bears. That is, following and photographing them and spending time observing them. They want to, on the coast of BC, they fly in an aircraft. The guide outfitter picks them up with a half ton on a logging road, takes them up to the stand, and if they're lucky, they can shoot a bear, and he can be back watching football and drinking beer in the afternoon. Now, that's hardly a wilderness trip. Hunting bears used to be a matter of going out for 2 weeks and doing a lot of tromping up and down mountains or up and down streams, whatever it is. So you hear where I'm going? It's the technology that it takes it a bit out of the
I mean, I think that's
class.
Yeah, I think that's what we talk about those ethics a lot here. Fair chase, fair kill, different ideas. I think, especially in that last interview too, people take umbrage to this idea that we would generalize hunters or use a straw man of, maybe there are plenty of asshole hunters out there. I'm sure plenty of people that do it. And I've run into some people that in hunting camp where I didn't necessarily feel like they had the same value system as I do. And, so there's no one here that's going to say that it's a completely pure thing. But at the same time, those examples I feel are rare and extreme, but they do happen. Yeah. And so that's the balance I think people that listen to this podcast would like to hear. Like, hey, look, conservation is complicated. Let's talk about what are the examples of this, where this hunt works from a conservation element. And then you can boil down kind of like the personal motivation, because that's so varied and so impossible to nail down.
Yeah, well, the gold standard is fair chase, eh? You put out some effort, you take some risk yourself to what you're hunting. Now, there isn't too much risk to the person if you're hunting antelope on the prairies, pronghorn, but there's still, you have to know a lot about the animal to get up on a pronghorn, and even if you shoot it at a distance, it takes a whole lot of stalking to get within range. And, the non-fair chase are the jerks that go out and see a herd of elk and start, flock hunting or herd hunting. They just fire lead into the middle of a bunch of elk and hope that something clicks. To me, that's, it's a matter of ethics and morality. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's not something we accept or promote here. And again, I always, people say those things to me. I had a vegan, my friend, a vegan philosopher by the name of Robert C. Jones, and he said, well, you're a pretty thoughtful hunter. You feel like that's a rarity or the exception. I said, there's no way for me to know, but I assume if I was a hardcore camper and somebody said, well, campers litter, I'd be like, yeah, those are not my campers. Those are, if there's somebody who's doing something illegal or extremely unethical, no hunter or no hunting organization would promote or accept that. So that's a tough thing. I think that's a tough thing for listeners of this show to hear, because we all know that's just not a great thing.
The reactions you received, was that on your blog, or was that just people calling you and you didn't record it? I had a look at a number of your blog sites and went on Meat Eater, and I couldn't find any commentary about
the post,
our contentious interview.
Yeah, well, I want to go over that a little bit. But the post on Instagram has 300-400 comments. Not that we need to revisit that right now. The post had a bunch of comments, and we get emails all the time about it. Emails is the place where I like to get most of my commentary, because it seems to be the most rational, the most less free thumbing it as it would be a commentary online. But it was one of, like, that conversation. I think it was because of the contentious nature of it, because there was upset moments in it. I think that's what drew people in. But like I said, the reason, number one, you said in this show, I don't know if you remember this, you said that you didn't get a hat. You remember that you didn't get a hat from your. So I'm going to send you. Me and Phil are going to sign a hat and send you a hat, because we're burying the damn hatchet, Barrie Gilbert.
And send me the recipe for the salty Gilbert.
Yes, and we're going to send you.
I got a kick out of that, but I should have cooled my jets earlier on. I think what happened with me is I liked your setup there. I talked to the gals going in the front door, and I thought this would be really neat to talk about my book and some of the issues in my book. And somehow we got off the rail. In fact, hit the third rail, it seems, and I just got pissed, and I apologize for that. But
see, the hatchet is buried. No need to apologize. I think in the end, for me, as I thought about that, and like I said, we talk about you a lot on this show. We talk about those moments, and it's essential to learn from them, and it's essential to say, like, okay, what happened there? Was it the conversation? Was it kind of just, did it happen randomly? How can we make sure that when we have a disagreement, a conversation where we know we're going to disagree, that we can work through, and maybe we don't even find common ground, but maybe we still can work through those, the feelings and emotions, and try to get people to a point where some objective reasoning happened, and people can walk away knowing, like, there can be a disagreement where people say, we're just never going to agree on this, and then we can move on from it and still learn something or other. And
the other point that I try to make with people is that your conversation has to be as complex as the issue is. Yeah. A lot of people want to simplify it. And, speaking of Val Geist, he has a straightforward wildlife management model that he likes to work for everything. And to me, that's a little too simple. Now, it works for Val because he's always been a goat and sheep and elk hunter. He knows a lot about them. He's written books on pronghorn and elk and muleys. But I just think I have a problem with that model being applied to all the carnivores. If this isn't too harsh a statement, we have a war going on against carnivores. And some people, any way you kill them, like look at Alaska now. They've just decided that they want to get rid of more carnivores with the wrong notion that they're going to get more caribou and moose hunting out of that. And that has no scientific basis whatsoever. I think that kind of thinking by the Board of Game, and these aren't trolls, these are people that clearly they're political, but they're responding, I think, to the majority of hunters who believe that if every bear you kill, you've saved all the game that they're going to eat. And we tried that with salmon at one time. The British Columbia government in the 50s had people with high-powered guns on government boats out shooting sea lions because they believed the sea lions were reducing the salmon. And of course, it was overfishing and too many canneries and all that. And they decimated the salmon for a long time. But they decided to take it out on a carnivore.
Yeah, and I think that's that's a key.
Go ahead. Of sea lions. I can remember the paper that I read decades ago, and they didn't have salmon in their guts at all. They were halibut or a whole bunch of fish that had no commercial value. So that was almost hate the carnivore of your flavor.
Yeah, we talked. I talked about that with Val Geist and some other things, and just this thing came up, and I like what you said about like the conversation has to be as complex as the topic, and that just goes to show. I mean, something that I've learned through talking to people on all sides of this issue is and you articulated it well there. Like, there's some people that there's a protectionist idea, and then there's this idea that for every wolf you kill, every bear you kill, you're saving X number of ungulates or X number of deer and elk. And it's just not that simple on either side. There's cohabitation, there's population dynamics, there's so many things. Sure. And so, luckily we can have these conversations and people can hear, what essentially I think is your view on one side, maybe Val's on another, although both of your views I think have nuance to them. So that's what I wanted to make sure that people could hear from you again, and we could laugh, have a salty Gilbert. Salty Gilbert, by the way, Phil can attest, is delicious. So,
I was skeptical, and I was proven wrong. It is a very good drink.
Tell Barry what it's all about, Phil.
Well, it's got a packet of Element Hydration electrolyte drink mix to keep you hydrated. It's got some hard seltzer water and vodka, and it's surprisingly balanced and smooth.
It is smooth and salty. Salty like you were last year.
Sounds like a private drinker's delight.
So yes, we hopefully we're going to send you some packets of Element, which title sponsors this program, and some White Claw and stuff to celebrate, and a hat. So all you got to do, Barry, we're going to send all that stuff to you. All you have to do is send me a picture of you wearing the hat and drinking your salty Gilbert, if you don't mind.
Okay, I'll do that for sure.
So we can consider. And
I'll send you one of my books too. Have you got a copy?
I don't have a copy here. No, you brought one, but I think you took it with you. You're mad at me.
That was my day of vindictiveness, I guess. I'll mail you one.
That's beautiful. We'll trade you. I'll get your address, and we will mail you a THC care package, and you mail me some books.
Okay.
All right, Barry.
Getting back to grizzly bears, in the last couple of days, I put on my thinking cap, and I thought, what do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about bear behavior with you, Ben and Phil?
Sure.
Or let's ignore the trolls and their values. But what I came to think about was our relationship with bears and relationship of bears to their foods. Like the behavior of bears on salmon streams is totally related to the surplus of food. And the bears there are like black bears. I mean, they're real pussycats. I almost stepped on a 700-pounder one day. I was moving too fast through Book's camp. And the bear jumps up and he looks at me and said, like as though to say, I thought we had an agreement. You'd stay on your damn trails and you'd leave the woods to us. And the thing could have bluff charged me. It could have swatted at me. It just jumped away. And it was a dominant male. And I thought, there's got to be a story there. When grizzly bears are super hungry or their jaws are damaged and they're real old, like the one that killed Tim Treadwell, that's a real exception in that country because all of those bears, I mean, Tim spent 13 years almost close enough to pet those coastal brown bears. So I'm getting back the relationship. Our relationship to salmon bears is a function of the bears' surplus of food that's available, and they don't even challenge each other. That's like you and I with a room full of steaks. I'm not going to fight you for a steak when all I have to do is gobble the rest of them that are around the room. So the bears are the same way, and our relationship to them in Yellowstone, of course, is very different. They're more food stressed. They're likely to be food conditioned if we habituate them too much. But food conditioning is never a problem on salmon streams. I've had watched situations where a person illegally had food in a pack and a bear got to it on the stream. It didn't bother with the food at all. They're not interested in our food if they've got a natural food. But that isn't true of a semi-starved bear in Glacier Park or Yellowstone or Teton or anything like that. If they're super hungry, you better watch out because they're going to come as close as they can to get belly full. It's either you steal food or you die.
Yeah, it's a cohabitation thing too, right? Garbage cans in rural areas where bears don't have a lot of food. There's lots of examples, even here in Montana, of those type of things.
Well, and it's the same with raccoons. If you want a problem in some cities, just leave some good old-fashioned garbage around.
Perfect. Let me ask you this question. It's popped in my mind, and we got to run here, so just make this the last question. Because I try to just narrow down where in the spectrum we are in terms of grizzly bears and when they're killed. If we ate grizzly bears, would that change? I'm not saying this is a fully hypothetical, but if we ate grizzly bears after we hunted them, would that change your feelings at all?
Well, you might convince me if the person needed the meat to feed his family or whatever. It gets back to basic motivations. Why do you want to shoot an animal like that? And if somebody says to me, well, there's nothing else in my area, and if I'm going to put something in the freezer for my family, I'll take a bear. And I'm sure a lot of Native Americans and Native Canadians have done this in the past. But by and large, I would say it's unlikely that that's going to occur. I guess I'm saying I don't agree with that because I don't think it's very likely.
Got it.
In other words, I'm not objecting because people don't eat the bear.
That's what I was asking. I was asking it in a backwards way. But yeah, I think that's what. If we can understand each other's objections to the activity, then we can start to suss out ways where maybe we can find common ground. And I imagine you would agree that conservation and wildlife management is finding this common ground because there are these divergent views that aren't going to go away. And finding some way to come in the middle is one of the ways.
And I'm an outlier. I look at the bear and know bears, and I think of them as a big dog. They're closely related to dogs, and we don't yet shoot dogs to eat them. Now they do in Asian countries. Dog is a delicacy, and God knows Lewis and Clark ate a few dogs on their way too, and horses. But I just know so much about bears and their culture that I don't think of them as a target. I just think there's so much that we haven't learned. Now, I'm not trying to say that, I'm the advanced thought process on this, but we've come to realize that that killer whales are variable and have cultures around the world. They've tracked their vocalizations, and there are numbers of species. Of course, chimpanzees with Jane Goodall is a good example too. We used to shoot mountain gorillas as a sport, and so once we, George Schaller studied mountain gorillas and found out a lot about them, and all of a sudden nobody wants to kill them anymore, except starving locals. So,
gotcha. Well, Barrie, we're gonna leave. We're gonna leave it right there. We could talk about this for hours and hours, as I know we could. But Moreover, I'm glad that we have buried the hatchet. You're gonna get a hat, a salty Gilbert recipe mix from us, and we hope you guys stay well up there.
I'm very impressed that you contacted me again, and I'm glad we did this. So let's do it again in a couple of months.
Hell yeah, let's do it again. And hey, you stay well, and best to your family and your wife up there, and we'll talk real soon. Look for that package in the mail.
Thanks a lot.
All right,
so
Barrie.
long, Dan.
See ya.
Phil.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, Phil, that was Barrie Gilbert. That was cool, man.
Yeah, it was.
You feel better now?
Yes. Yeah, I think it was worth it.
Catharsis.
Yeah.
And Barrie still, hopefully listens to this. I say Barrie still has some pretty extreme views, and he still has kind of the hunting straw man in his mind that goes out and whacks big animals for pleasure and those types of things. That's the angle that he comes at it with, and that's something that even in my previous years I probably wouldn't wanted to hear, but I feel like we got to hear those things. We got to hear the way that people see us, and that you can either get mad at Barrie or you can say, I'm gonna do my best to be as ethical as possible and share those ethics and share that conversation with everybody that I can.
Yeah, prove him wrong.
Prove him wrong. Another guy, Chris Darimont. You're about to listen to Chris. It's interesting here as we kind of go through the different viewpoints as we're talking to Barrie. It's interesting. Chris is an interdisciplinary conservation scientist, and he's done a lot of things. And he takes scientific tools and applies it to natural and social elements within conservation. And he was part of a really cool paper about why people hunt, what the purpose is. He kind of lined it up as achievement, but then he also has some interesting views on grizzly bears and hunting them and hunting predators, just like our friend Dr. Barrie Gilbert. And so I wanted to pair those two things together, let you listen to him. He's from Canada, and so hey, another polite Canadian to disagree with. Enjoy Chris Darimont.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there because they're great and they're super friendly, and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Chris, how are you, sir?
I'm well, Ben. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing just fine down here in Montana. We're having a little smoke roll in from a local fire, but how's it up your way?
It's actually rainy, foggy, kind of West Coast fall weather, which is actually nice. A little break from the sun for a bit.
Yeah, we'd take it. We'll take it all day. Well, we have only about an hour to go, so we'll jump right into what we want to talk about and
Sure.
what we've connected on previously. I think before we do anything, we just got to tell people a little bit about what you do and how you're producing some of the papers we'll talk about and some of the work that is impactful for thinking about hunting and its motivations.
Sure, yeah.
So hit us up with what you do and what it all means, because I described your job title, but I don't think that does it quite justice.
Sure, yeah. Well, I describe myself as interdisciplinary conservation scientist. That is to say, even though I'm trained as a biologist and specifically as an evolutionary ecologist, I draw on other disciplines like geography, philosophy, computer science, some mathematics, you name it, whatever the tools are required, my students and I tend to use. And we do a lot of applied work, although some of what we do is kind of out of interest and to test important theory in ecology or evolution. And we often, but not always, work in wildlife systems. And we recognize that it's hard to learn about a wildlife system without understanding the people involved in that system. And the people could be, hunters, as we'll probably talk about today, no doubt, or, and by that I mean kind of hunters maybe like you and I, of European descent in North America. But often our work involves indigenous peoples as partners and people that have been, hunting and fishing the animals we care about for, millennia. So I'm a jack of all trades, probably master of none. But my students and I tend to do some pretty interesting work that's mostly applied.
Yeah. When you talk about apply, can you just kind of describe, we'll talk about a paper that kind of connected me to you, but then I've learned a lot more. I've even had listeners write in about you before the, I think it was the first time we had listeners write in about you before we aired anything.
How did they know?
I think I made a comment on Instagram that people were saying, let's have some varied views on, this is after we talked last week, as I was just telling you, to Dr. Valerius Geist. Yeah. And we had some listeners writing in like, let's have some various views. I said, well, next week we're going to have Chris Darimont on. And I got a couple of emails with people that knew your work and were interested in this. Both agreed and disagreed with you.
Right on. Okay.
Which I think this is why we're here. It's what makes this interesting. But I just read, online hunting forums identify achievement as prominent among multiple satisfaction. This is a paper that I came across online. And how do you create a paper like this? What is the process that goes into this work, and how would you describe the overall output?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I do a few I've done a few papers with students, mostly undergrads, actually, these wonderful young honor students in this domain. And where this work started was from me kind of lurking on hunting forums, mostly for my own interests, because, as you know, you can get a lot of good information about hunting and, associated, strategies and context and stories. And I became pretty hooked on it, maybe about 10 years ago, kind of, especially learning about our black-tailed deer here, which are, as you probably know, kind of ghosts of the rainforest and a real hard hunt. And so I was creeping on those online forums. And as I did it, I became really fascinated in what hunters had to offer in terms of, explaining not only their hunt, but, why they hunt, expressing what we refer to as satisfactions, from which we can infer motivation, and so on and so forth. And I thought, dang, there's some good stuff here. And I was familiar with some of the what we call human dimensions literature, understanding, the social side of hunting. And I thought, not many people have used this data source to ask questions like this. So maybe first paper is about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, maybe. And we dove in, and it's been pretty fun ride.
And do you find that it's the seedy underbelly of message boards, or that there's a mixed bag of individuals and perspectives there?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's hard to fully assess how representative the participants on online hunting forums are compared to the broader hunting community. I mean, that's a kind of a prickly one statistically, and not a lot of work has been done there. So there's probably, a relatively modest bias in terms of who posts there and what sort of material they post and what they may express. So for what I mean by that is you might, for example, find on average people that are slightly more interested in expressing their opinions or knowledge or, interested in social media. Let's just leave it at that. And then furthermore, knowing that they have a broad audience, they may say things that they may not say in other contexts, So there's clearly some biases to the data source, but when you compare it to the other major and kind of more orthodox way to understand hunting motivations, and that is the hunter interview or hunter survey, which may be more randomly distributed, but there may be a bias in terms of who responds, and there may also be an important bias as many people have thought about, and that is, what people choose to say to those who are interviewing them for fear of being judged. And some of those inhibitions may fall away online, as you know, online.
Yes,
all sorts of things happen. So it was a new data source, maybe not a perfect one, but a real interesting one, and it's been a fertile ground to learn a little more about the satisfactions hunters seek and the motivations underlying them. And I often link them to a separate body of literature and a separate kind of domain in which my students and I work, and that's in evolutionary anthropology or evolutionary ecology, understanding the kind of deeper context of hunting.
Well, and this is kind of the purpose of this show. I mean, we do a lot of things. We explore a lot of topics, and we'll talk about some other things, other work that you've done that I think is interesting and worth discussion. But that is what we do here. We want to look at as many individual whys as we can. Why are you out there? What's your motivation? And then also seek to learn a little bit about, what our motivations are, what our ethics are. We've even been discussing kind of the neurology of predatory behavior in animals and humans here recently. So that's something that there's many angles to look at, as I'm sure you well know now. But when we talk about what your paper talks about and something we've talked about in previous episodes, this idea of achievement This idea that there is this achievement felt by hunters, and all the hunters that are listening to this show have felt some sort of achievement. They've felt some sort, as you described, satisfaction from many elements of hunting. Would you say that when you guys looked at this, you looked at every moment in the hunting spectrum, from being with family and friends to the athletic part of it, to the actual killing and the eating, or was there something that tended to stand out, or just like a full spectrum of the hunting experience?
Yeah, you mentioned some important other context there. You said being with family and friends. So the satisfactions literature that's about as old as I am, and its fifth decade there, 45 years old or something, identified kind of three buckets that hunters look for, one of which is achievement. And a lot of the early work thought, clearly this is mostly about achievement. But as the literature progressed, we began to understand that other things are important, and affiliation. So they're all going to start with A. So achievement, affiliation, being with your buddies or your old man or your kids, for example. Is the second one, and the third one is an appreciation. What we feel, when we're out there, and the sun comes up and it's gorgeous, and we appreciate nature or appreciate the animal. We have some sort of appreciation. So those three A's: achievement, affiliation, appreciation. So in the work that we're referring to, one of these papers here, we went online to these three hunting forums. One was kind of a North America-wide one. One was from Texas, and one was from here in BC. And we looked at satisfactions expressed by posters of stories. Someone writes a story that says, whatever, my biggest blacktail yet, and it's this story, as the scene here, and then there's replies to it. Anyways, we just looked at the posts, and we used what's called qualitative analysis to categorize different phrases into their different buckets if they were relevant: achievement, affiliation, appreciation, and that's kind of the background of how we did our work. There's several hundred stories, I forget how many, and we looked across a variety of prey. Usually this work had been done on deer. That's been actually most of the human dimensions work has been on deer. We wanted to broaden it to look at not only deer but other large herbivores and the carnivores too. And in a nutshell, what we found is that achievement is prominent, no matter what context. Those who are posting about their hunts are using language and phrases that refer to achievement. Like felt great to get the biggest buck of my life, or a phrase like that in different domains, and it could have been about their athletic performance too. Mm-hmm. So had to scramble up some incredible scree to get this sheep or goat or whatever. And that's also an achievement thing. But we did find that, other satisfactions, being with your buddies, affiliation, and appreciating things, the context was also important, but at a far lower rate. We tend to have read or, detected those phrases quite a bit less. And then we looked at, are there differences between the stories of people that were describing hunts of a large herbivore versus a large carnivore? And there was. We see an even far more pronounced frequency of achievement-oriented sentences and a near absence of appreciation, whether it be for the animal itself or for the scenery or whatever. Those tended to be mostly about achievement. So anyways, those are the results in a nutshell, which was, a nice enough contribution to earn a spot in a good journal about this sort of stuff, because some of these questions hadn't been asked before. So
yeah, and I think, and when I first read it, and I'm I'm thinking about it, and I try to, and we definitely all have our biases when it comes to these things. And I've always tried to, erase, look at this from what it is. And I think it was 455 stories, if I go back and read that. I've got it in front of me here. And so that's no insignificant number of people talking on these forums. So, you're looking at a certain type of communication. And in my, I've been in the hunting industry for over a decade and done and worked for a lot of publications and thought about these things all the time. Like, how do we express, and traditionally we expressed it by killing big bucks, right? That was when I first came into the industry. I worked for a hunting magazine, a prominent hunting magazine, and you either had to have the wildlife picture or the grip and grin picture on the cover, and then those things started to evolve. So as you looked at this, because I want to get to some other things, so I kind of want to maybe microwave this conversation a little bit. But as you look at this, do you make any inferences to, the types of stereotypes that are out there for hunters, trophy hunters, things like that, or is there a different thing you take away?
Well, I mean, yeah, we could take this in all sorts of directions, but it reaffirms what evolutionary anthropologists have written about and discussed for years, that there's a good reason why people are so concerned with achievement. I mean, not just in hunting, and I'm specifically talking about men here. You go to a job site or a weight room or whatever, and guys, we evolved behaviors that tended to seek achievement and the display of that achievement to others, and that was really adaptive. That was very useful to compete with other males in an ancestral environment, and to win the ladies, and so on and so forth. So of course achievement's going to be prominent. It still is. We're in a very different contemporary environment now, but those behaviors and tendencies still are retained, and you still go to, you flip through the Cabela's catalog or hunting magazines, and a lot of the ads that wants to sell you stuff, focus on achievement. There's clearly some about affiliation, being with your buds, and some beautiful stuff with your family, but clearly achievement is important. To your question about stereotypes, well, yeah, even within the hunting community that we use phrases like grip and grin, we recognize that we like to show this stuff off. That's just kind of who we are. Yeah. It can be judged by others, and it clearly is judged by others outside the hunting community, that it's gotten hunters some flack, and maybe rightly so. It kind of just is, and how hunters kind of choose to manage that it may either bring more flack or more understanding by the non-hunting community. I mean, this departs a lot from the work, but I imagine this is where you want to go with this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to me, because I've over the years fallen in and out of some of these common tropes in the hunting world, and these traditions that I felt like I needed to take part in, and some of the pressures of the community, sometimes to good result, sometimes maybe to not so good result. And so then I took a step back personally, just me personally, and said, what is the motivation here? Achievement is part of it, but what is the achievement that really is at the heart of my passion for this? What really is it? And so I landed on a bunch of things. But a couple of them I think it'd be interesting to talk about. One is the craft and the skill of everything, and that this craft and skill has this three-dimensional quality where if I'm really awful at bow hunting, I have the chance to maim, wound, otherwise injure another living creature. And so this craft and skill, while learning to play pool is great, it feels two-dimensional. There's nothing at the other end of that pool ball except for your own satisfaction. I hope you're not doing anything that might hurt somebody.
I'm a surfer, so I understand that. I understand that metaphor with pool, that there's something coming back after that investment into your craftsmanship and your training and your discipline. And, I'm a martial artist and a surfer. I understand these things, and a hunter, far less crafty than you, I suspect. But I can understand that's a part of, how you value the outputs of your achievement. But I think I interrupted you. So the craftsmanship, and there's probably some more things maybe that relate to food, I bet, eh?
Yeah, I mean, there's food for sure, but the food I think is also part of the craft, and then the transformation of the animal from a living thing that I never leave it. My proximity to it is if I butcher my own animals, which I do, I never leave it from the time it becomes a steak and my child is smiling while he's eating it to the time it lived on the mountain. So that certainly is a huge passion and achiever in my life. But the one I think would be interesting to hear you talk about, having worked on and read 455 stories like this, is do you think that hunters, the core question I have is, do you think that hunters realize the game-like quality that draws them in here, the push and pull of learning where an animal lives and going up against an unpredictable foe? And what do you think about that and all that you've kind of done with this paper and everything else you've looked at?
Oh, of course. Well, no, I drawing my own experience as a hunter, drawing on our experiences in reading stories like this that we even talk about in this paper. And by the way, this paper is led by Alina Ebling-Schuld, the undergrad honors student who kind of crushed it, did a great job. But clearly that's a part of it. Yeah, I mean, it may culminate, and many men, and especially young men, and I want to return to that, may especially elevate the achievement of actually getting the animal and showing others that he has gotten that animal. Clearly, there's a whole process, from planning your hunt, the strategy about where am I going to be at an hour before the sun starts coming up, to, how delicious is this backstrap going to taste after you've butchered it, and feeding it to your family. Clearly, all that is clearly important. Some of these other things may become more important as we age out as men. So you probably know, and I know you got kids, as do I. Our testosterone goes down an awful lot, when we have kids, and our propensity to feel like we want to signal our achievements to others, to compete with other dudes or to win ladies when we have a woman in our life or a partner in our life and have kids. Evolution has shaped some really pronounced differences in how we behave that's moderated by, or mediated rather, by hormones, and in particular testosterone. So and people, actually way back in the literature started noticing that achievement becomes less, the actual achievement of getting the animal itself becomes less important as we mature, physiologically, and maybe even, mature as hunters more broadly, recognizing that there's a pretty cool craft background to this, and a foodie sort of orientation behind this too.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned kind of the life cycle of a hunter, because there's some commentary on like what that looks like, where you start and then kind of where you finish. And I have had a lot of experience with people I really respect. Wyman Menzer is a friend of mine, listeners will know, who was a trapper and hunter for profit in his young life, and lived in a dugout and got all paid for his college loans with the pelts of coyotes and bobcats. And then you ask him now 50, 60 years later, and he abhors killing them.
Interesting.
And loves to photograph them. And he said, his name's Wyman Menzer. He's a famous photographer. And if you listen to the podcast we did, I would just happen to be listening to the podcast we did a couple months ago, and he was explaining how he felt that the older he got, he explains it like life from A to Z. He's like, the closer I get to Z, the more I appreciate my own life. And so it seems to me only natural to appreciate the life of animals where I didn't earlier. And so that's just something I'd heard recently that struck me.
That's a really cool anecdote, and it kind of aligns with theory, and from like evolutionary theory to anthropological theory to human dimensions theory and data that we see this progression within individuals pretty commonly. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And there's a couple other papers that I was looking at. I'm sure they're in the same vein of working with your students and coming up with these theories and then working them out. There's one called Why Men Trophy Hunt. It was interesting. You did that. I'm sure you remember that one. This was 2017. Can you tell people a little bit? I know I'm probably throwing that at you, but can you tell people a little bit what that was about and how that came to be?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so that was a collaboration with evolutionary anthropologists from University of Utah, and this was at the Cecil, kind of the zenith of Cecil frenzy, the lion who was trophy hunted, and the fervor it brought globally, and people, a lot of sentiment you read is like, why would a dude do this? Why? And you can get into sort of more approximate, more kind of in my view, unsatisfactory answers like, oh, he's just looking to show off, and he's got a small PP, or like just stuff that is not very satisfying or likely correct or whatever. And so we wanted to examine the available theory to try to understand, theory and data, understand why do men do this? You pay big bucks, you pay other costs, opportunity costs of not hunting other things. It's potentially dangerous. And there's no real tangible benefits that we tend to associate primarily with hunting, and that is, something to eat at the end of the day. So why the hell would a guy invest so many costs accept so many costs to do something that seemingly has no benefit? But when you start poking around in the literature from hunter-gatherer societies that are still out there and our ancestral past, you start to understand that those costs that hunters are willing to accept as trophy hunters in particular, that don't eat their food, are really important in understanding why the hell they do this. So the idea is this. It's referred to as costly signaling. And the idea is you want to behave in costly ways because that allows you to signal to others that you have what it takes, the intellectual or these days financial or physical abilities to behave in costly ways. It's not much different than a peacock investing an incredible amount of energy, food energy, into producing this tail, in the case of males, to signal to others. That's sort of the more biological, wildlife analog system that you either invest in expensive morphologies, or in this case, behaviors, to signal to competitors and potential mates that you got it. You've got what it takes. If you were, a lesser man in terms of your brains or brawn, you couldn't afford to do this. So it kind of resolves that paradox I spoke of. Like, why would a dude do this? He can't even eat the lion, and he's paying huge bucks to do this, and he's not out hunting other things he could hunt. So it provides a satisfactory explanation underlying the sort of seemingly puzzling behavior of trophy hunters.
Yeah, I love the way that you put that. I mean, I've as a kid and coming up, I would always tend to disagree. I wrote some things. Hopefully, no one Googles anything that I wrote in 2010. But I wrote some things in the beginning of my career very much excoriating anyone attacking an African trophy hunter, and looking at conservation-based community management and the money that goes into these communities and all those things. And I look at that and I understand that part. That's a very logical, and even for somebody, as you say, that is successful, has wealth, and understands the application of that wealth, like it does make sense. The tangible makes sense, but the intangible, the motivation, what you're talking about, the why would you do it, doesn't really compute for me. And the times that I've found myself in those situations where I don't know exactly why I'm doing this, or I don't know why I feel like I want to shoot that wolf, or I want to go to Africa and shoot a Cape buffalo if we're not going to eat it or whatever. And then I find myself, maybe I don't know why, but now I have to fall back on the common, not excuses, but the explanations for the benefits to the place I'm going, or to the people and the communities in which I'm going. And so that creates this huge and very complex and interesting, I think, dichotomy between what you're talking about, which is important. Like, why the hell would you do that? Why did you need to shoot that lion? What are you getting from that? You're not going over there just to pay the money, because if you just went over there just to pay the money, you just send the money.
Yeah, totally. That I'm glad you said that, because, there are kind of two different arguments. The one, and in some cases, and the jury's still out on this, there are some conservation economic reasons why trophy hunting can benefit wildlife and their habitat, particularly in Africa, although the data are clearly mixed and unresolved, and there's no broad conclusions there. But you're right. So one of the explanations, that one talks about the system in general, should we have trophy hunting, blah, blah, blah. And the other explanation that I've just gone through is like, why would it do this? And those, in general, why do men behave this way? And so one explanation can't suffice for another. That is to say, we can't say, okay, Dr. Walter Palmer did this to help further conservation. That's his motivation to help, lion and other wildlife habitat in Africa. That's not a satisfactory answer. That's what people use to justify the industry. But those are, two really different things.
Can I stop you real quick? And because I think you're right, and I want to maybe I didn't make my point well enough. I do think that I've talked to folks at the IUCN. I've talked to, we're going to, in future episodes, have folks like Dr. Dillis Rowe and Rosie Cooney on. These are people that study these things and know that these communities are benefiting from this activity, and these trophy hunts are resulting in they call them community-based conservation is what they call it.
Right.
This is resulting in more animals. And I've seen it, and like this is this regulatory body that I understand, and they know way more than I do. So I like to hear that from them. So I want to separate that aside, knowing that this is the way I'll just describe this, and people will not like this, but this is the way I think about it. Okay. This is an unsustainable model. We would never allow a small number of international wealthy hunters to fund conservation in America. That would never be allowed in North America. We would never allow 10,000 hunters to come to our continent or our country and pay money so that we could have more wildlife. That's not sustainable, because what if those people decide they don't want to come anymore? So you have that on a broader level, but on the secondary levels to that, or probably more importantly, this is the only way it can work at this moment. So there's other socioeconomical and economical things that should probably be fixed before we go erasing this and replacing it with something else. So that's I just want to say that's my stance. Some people might not like the fact that I think it's kind of like holding it hostage for a moment and saying, like, I'm the only way that this can work. It's working. It's working probably better than most people think, but it's just not sustainable. And so that's my little opinion or rant on that. So we'll continue on the other side.
That's cool. I appreciate that. I know kind of enough about that whole thing to be dangerous, and but like philosophically, I totally hear what you're saying. I think and that you brought up, the inverse. What happens if, North American wildlife conservation hinged narrowly on, a bunch of international wealthy people coming over and killing wildlife here. That would be pretty messed up. That's a good point.
Yeah, and to say that I think this system should stand until we can find a better one, but we should be working to find a better one. We shouldn't be saying like, look how great this is. It's not great. It's just not. No matter what no matter what group you're in, it just gets. This is objective to me.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. We've written on the ethics of this, more generally, and almost arrived at the same conclusion in that we said, should there be no other viable option, especially when things are precarious, we should accept this one and only option with, sort of commensurate degree of somber understanding. I forget the words we use, but it's not something we should perhaps trumpet as an outstanding solution. We should be somewhat circumspect and whatnot.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there, because they're great and they're super friendly, and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Back to covering back off on the other side of this, which is the motivation, because I think that's what, while hunters seem to want to kind of take the pragmatic approach, which I do appreciate, the community that I'm in, you want to take this pragmatic approach. Are there more animals? Yes. Well, we've had the comment that, Dr. Valerius Geis made the comment that he feels like the last African elephant will survive in Texas.
Wow.
And these things are interesting to think about, and we'll continue to think about them. But then you go back to what's the I think the anti-hunting world or the hunting world that doesn't, or the non-hunting world that doesn't understand this, is looking at what you were talking about, the motivation, not the tangible impact to the animals and the population and the ecosystem, but the motivation. And so I think that's why when I was reading this paper, I'm like, this is getting to the real opposition to this. It's motivation. And so I guess the question is, do you think it's hard to? I mean, every individual motivation is different. Is it hard to collect all those motivations and make inferences, or is this something you're comfortable, given the work that you've done?
Well, there are patterns.
Yeah, sure.
That's probably the best way to say it. That clearly there's tons of variation across the hunting population. We've talked about how age may have clearly does have a pronounced influence on our motivation as we age out as hunters. There's geographic variation. There's variation as it may relate to what target we're currently after on a hunt and so on. So no, I mean, there's no absolute, definitely not. And in fact, in that paper, we express that, multiple satisfactions are common. But, the commonest is achievement by and large. Mm-hmm. Getting into the kind of the non or anti-hunting opposition, and people do, as you're well aware, some sort of, kind of moral calculus, for lack of a better word, and they tend to ask themselves, and I'm leaving alone, the most kind of extreme, anti-hunters here, but most of society that doesn't hunt, my feeling is, and there's, some suggestion that this is the case, do some basic moral calculus, like, okay, what is a hunter getting out of killing this animal? And do those benefits justify the costs that the animal itself bears? Because we know, we've seen animals suffer and die in front of us. That's kind of the ultimate cost any, sentient animal can pay. So all of us, hunters included, we think, okay, what am I getting out of this to justify this sort of behavior? And what the sociological data tell us, anyways, especially from the United States, and you're probably those big surveys by Responsive Management and mm-hmm. and Manfredo work on values, and generally that tells us that by and large the non-hunting community supports hunting for food, to the tune of 80% of people in the U.S. But when you ask, do you support hunting for sport and trophy, that support goes down into the 20s%. And then there's clearly some complexity when some animals are, great trophy animals for those that are interested in trophies, but they're also incredibly delicious and clearly sought after for food. I'm thinking, mm-hmm. Elk or moose or, something like that, in particular sheep for that matter. So that's when it gets a little murky, but for me, the kind of way to understand at the most basic level what the non or anti-hunting society is thinking out there is whether the benefits that accrue to hunters justify the costs that are being imposed on individual animals that more and more people care about. I mean, as scientists and hunters, we probably clearly prioritize the health of and well-being of populations. But, a lot of us also understand that, there's individuals in those populations that, have the same physiology as you or me. And I don't know, I've never been shot, and I don't think you have. And, it would hurt, and mm-hmm. there would be suffering, and dying sucks. So we should think about some of this stuff as other people are clearly doing. So for me, that kind of boils down some of these controversies.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to express the opposition to this. And as I said, I think that I always came at this like, well, I have to be pragmatic. It's a numbers game, and it's a food game, and there's other things that seem more just logic based and less emotion based, and that's always what people throw back at a progressive liberal non-hunter who thinks the deer's cute. And I've started to peel my own biases about that away, and then look at, okay, well, let's look at the death for a moment. The death itself for a moment. So we talked about the craft and skill portion of that, but also one of the things I think emotionally that I've started to appreciate is the fact that I have this, what we've been calling tragic knowledge of death. Like I emotionally understand death. Doesn't make it any easier. Well, it won't make death in my life any easier, but it does. If you really dig into the natural world, death is a benefit. It's
well,
a benefit
it clearly
to
is at a population level or an
right.
ecosystem level. It ain't a benefit
to the dead animal. Right. That's exactly what I was about to say.
Out in front of us.
Exactly.
Totally. Yeah.
And so that's the thing that we have to, when a wolf kills a neonate, there's benefit to the wolf. There certainly is no benefit to the young life of this elk or mule deer or whatever that's getting taken out. And so I think nature has the same struggle that I'm having. And so I'm able to then relate to nature like, hey, I get it, man. I get that the death is good for me, but it's not good for the thing I just killed. And that's at some level kind of the baseline of predatory behavior, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Does this make sense to you, or is this?
Yeah, it totally does, man. I appreciate or maybe understand death more than others that are non-hunters. Watching, an animal blink out before you, it's heavy. It's real heavy, even probably to the coldest, people among us, is heavy as hell. So, something that most of us take real seriously.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like there'll be an understanding? I know, one of my favorite quotes is hunting is so different from the inside than it is from the outside. That was Michael Pollan in Omnivore's Dilemma. And I always thought about that. I wonder if, kind of getting off the rails here, but who cares, it's a podcast. I wonder if you have thought about, is there a way to make that connection for people that have never done this? That like, hey, this death is kind of it's a thing we always think about, but man, it's so hard to imagine if you've never done it, doing it. I think for a lot of people.
Yeah. No, I think it's for people, and you probably know this, there's lots of people that are actually, there's more people becoming increasingly distanced from the natural world and ignorant of it compared to those that are, getting more in tune with it. So I think it's going to be real hard for people to understand that. That being said, and going back to kind of the moral calculus stuff, and conflicts and all this, I think, what's been clear from the sociological data for, decades and increasingly so is that the non-hunting public are generally fine with us killing deer and elk and all that stuff. And they're generally, but not always, generally not cool with us killing something for only a rug or, only to get the predator off the landscape. And if something like a wolf or a cat isn't eaten. And I don't think that's going to go away because I think the kind of fundamentals of that calculus, it's pretty hard to convince the non-hunting public that, killing a wolf is justified. That's just not going to happen. And people can argue all day and night about, the values of it, but generally the non-hunting public, I don't believe, and the data kind of support this, are ever going to accept that. But that being said, there are ways for hunters probably to, and I'm sure you've chatted about this with others on podcasts, there's a way to kind of hunters to manage their behavior and think about the non-hunting public a little more in their outreach and whatnot.
Yeah, we talk about that quite a lot. And
I bet.
And I'm glad we're kind of bring up wolves and predators here because we've had, I won't explain the whole tale that we've gone through, but we had a bear attack story come out of Alaska a couple of months ago, and the story around it was insane, and it got me to thinking about predators, bear attacks, our appreciation for them, why we're so drawn to bear attacks themselves, and then kind of following this thought process all the way to walking in Yellowstone with a predator biologist, and then having a neurologist who studied the central amygdala and the neuron pockets in there and how they work for predatory behavior, and then on to guys like Dr. Barrie K. Gilbert, who's been on the show, who is a staunch protectionist when it comes to hunting predators, and then Dr. Valerius Geist, who is in fact the opposite, who is arguing last week for intelligent intervention, and that being the only way forward in terms of predators. And so I guess I'll briefly say I've learned that there are a lot of people who've thought a lot about this, that have done scholarly works, that believe all, things that are completely opposite of each other when it comes to predators. And I know you've had your moments with that up there, and especially in British Columbia with the grizzly bears. So you got to talk about your experience with this kind of. I know you've had some. We were talking a week or so ago about some of the more controversial, I guess you could say, quote unquote, things that you've said, or some of the things that have gone on in British Columbia. Just give people your story briefly.
Sure. Yeah. I'm much closer aligned to Dr. Gilbert than Dr. Geist in terms of what it really comes down to is values. Do I think it's right to hunt a predator? And this isn't a question of science. Science tells us, how ecosystems work or how they may respond to our management interventions, but science can never really tell us that, it's okay or right to kill a predator. That's kind of a value-based decision. And like, 70 to 80% of society, and interestingly, about the same percentage of hunters, I'm not supportive of killing a predator, if the intention is not to eat it. Those benefits that would accrue to me just don't justify the costs imposed on the animal. And that's the way I feel. And it's controversial because, there's lots of scientists in BC included that think, I shouldn't really be talking about values and this is ascientific in some sort of way. But my view, and I believe it's a more correct one, is that we're in the realm of values here and not science at all. Science can never justify whether, the grizzly bear hunt in BC is something we should be doing or not. That's clearly a subject of values, and that's why, in fact, the BC government turned off the hunt, because it doesn't align with the values of most people, including hunters from BC.
Yeah, and most of the folks in the hunting community that I know up there, I'd say it's split probably. If I had to just think about a number, I think it would be 60-40 in my world of people that actually live in BC. Most of these guys are remote outfitters and people that I know. So I think even in that world, 60, 65, maybe 70, 7 out of 10 people want us to hunt grizzly bears. And again, we go back to what we talked about earlier. These are people that live out in these, the places where I've hunted before, Quesnel and places that folks might know.
For moose, yeah.
Yeah, for moose, yep. And so these people see it as economic. They see it as a livelihood
clearly
thing.
They do. Yep. Clear. I was gonna challenge you gently on that. If you're talking about outfitters, of course. 70% or more are going to be because that brought in good money, admittedly, for them and people they hire, and there's no doubt about that.
I would say that if I just people, I guess the reason why I will throw my opinion in here is because we've been exploring this, and the reason why we wanted to talk to folks like yourself that believe what you do, and Dr. Gilbert and Dr. Geist. And Dr. Staler as well, is just trying to get a picture of where this sits. I think if I could speak for Dr. Geist, he believes that we are best equipped to manage these animals, and we are best equipped to make sure that we have a healthy balance of all of these ungulates plus prey animals plus predators. He feels very strongly about that. And
he does, I know.
as you well know, and I think you probably feel is equally strongly about the idea that this is a value and it is not, as he would. I think he would say, and again, I'm not real sure on this one if I'm being honest. He would say that, listen, this is our duty. This is our duty as conservationists and scientists. This is something that if we don't step in here, we have our human brains and the ability to step in and provide balance where nature just won't.
I believe that those sort of interventions can be really useful, but best reserved for cases in which and I hate this phrase, but for simplicity, the balance of nature is upset. For example, invasive animals. Yes, definitely we need to intervene and lethally because invasive species is it's one of the horsemen of the current environmental apocalypse here. And so I would absolutely align with Geist on in that sort of context, but in, managing multiple predator, multiple prey systems that have managed themselves with, and I will note, with the participation of people for millennia. There's clearly a justification to know that, in those contexts, things generally manage themselves. And when we, tweak hunting to look very different than it has for millennia, punching in roads to new areas, being able to take animals from a couple kilometers away, increasing our ability to target specific phenotypes or, specific forms within populations. The biggest curl, or the biggest racks or whatever, or the biggest fish especially. That has caused all sorts of mayhem in the ecological and evolutionary landscape out there. So that's where Dr. Geist and I would probably not see eye to eye.
Yeah. Well, at some point, I think what I've realized through all of this, and I've had a couple listeners write in and say that, well, there's a point where you have to push these people on both directions. People that want to push Dr. Geist and people would want me to push you on these things. And
sure.
I want there to, and this is what I've found in reading things and looking around, that there are these disparate ideas. And I wonder if you kind of, in BC or even in any work you've done in the States or with your colleagues or people in your industry, as it might be called, that's really not an industry, community maybe, scientific community. If you've kind of seen that there are sides, because I've seen, especially in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem here, that it tends to be the game and fish department versus environmental activists or animal rights activists.
Clearly,
it seems like that keeps happening. And
no, you're right. It's highly polarized. There's definitely camps. There's clearly exceptions and some hybridization. I mean, I suspect, I'm kind of one puzzling thing, because on one hand, I'm against some forms of hunting based on my value systems, and strongly and outspokenly so. But I'm also a hunter, so I'm like a sort of a bear hugger on one hand, and
bastard,
and
can't believe it.
I know, and I like to chase moose on the other hand. So it's hard for some people to resolve, and I get a fair share of attacks.
Yeah, you were telling me that sucks, man. Like you shouldn't get attacks based on that. We should be able to. We should be able to talk about this. We have to be able to talk about this.
Interestingly, a lot of the attacks come from other wildlife scientists that in either sort of passive aggressive or what I refer to as sort of stealth advocacy ways try to trash me, or the bolder among them a little more directly so. But that's kind of the way it's always been. In terms of camps and polarization, I see some potential avenues for change. I think one is the kind of new foodie movement and getting, people that may not have grown up as hunters into the bush, with the idea of getting, humanely sourced, especially in comparison to industrial farming, meat on their tables and delicious, hormone-free stuff. So I think there's some nice bridges that are being built and will continue to be built there. I see, it's pretty modest in effect now, but I see it, progressing, and that is people from the hunting community saying, I love hunting, and I love hunting so much that I don't want the social license that we depend on to be ruined by, the minority of us that want to shoot a wolf and grip and grin it on Instagram. So I see, some seeds of change being planted in in those two and probably other kind of contexts.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that I used to try to see this as camps, like the old way and the new way. I've fallen into that before, but now I don't think of it that way. I think of it as I want the individuals in the community that I'm around and people that I can talk to and affect just to be thoughtful and think about these things, because sometimes they're hard to suss out personally. Sometimes you've shot a wolf and you have the wolf rug and you feel like you're saving some elk, and it may take some time to think about that and to understand what you've done personally, not what we should do, but what you have done. And just those thoughts, I think, are in and of themselves a change to be able to say, when I came up, that wasn't a thing I talked about with my dad, but him and I do talk about it now, because I think he is very happy and he understands that my generation, I think there's more, more natural history, more anthropology, more zoology, and more all kinds of things that we're interested in that help inform this thoughtful approach to what's a very serious thing. Killing a wolf is not a thing somebody should take lightly. In any context, or a deer, or anything. So, one thing, I think maybe the last thing I'd like to hear your thoughts on. We have a guy, a good friend here, real thoughtful guy, real smart individual named Clay Newcomb. He has a phrase called "guard the gate," where he talks about, and I've heard many folks talk about this. When he talks about it, it's compelling to me because he's articulate, but he says guard the gate. He feels like if, we let the value systems driven, by other parts of our country take away hunting with dogs or hunting with over bait or hunting, predators, that they'll just continue to find reasons, value-based reasons to disagree. And so that's his guard the gate. What do you think about that? What do you as somebody that is kind of practicing some of the value-based judgments that you're doing? Do you feel like you're not going to take his stuff, are you?
I hear the nature of his argument kind of like the slippery slope. First they'll come, up here we hear it. First they'll come for the grizz, take away our grizzly hunt, and next they're going to try to take away our moose. Mm-hmm. And for me, I understand those concerns and insecurities, and I understand that he rightly recognizes that the non-hunting community can have enormous influence. That much is fact. There's no question, from kind of the ballot measure stuff that happens in the states that impacts hunting and hunting policy to just big government decisions like happened here in BC. The non-hunting public does have huge influence on wildlife, and we can argue, as to their privilege of doing so, whether it's deserved or not. If they're all in the cities and don't even interact with wildlife, why should they dictate what goes on with wildlife? So we can get into that, but maybe let's not for now. But so this guy is right in understanding the enormous influence of non-hunters and the potential for change. I think his concerns are probably way overblown. There are probably clearly some, specific hunting contexts that are not going to sit well with the majority of society. Hunting over bait may be one of those. Hunting with dogs, I'm not sure. Hunting predators for trophy clearly doesn't sit well, but most of what we do as hunters, most of those hunting days in the field, most of our efforts, most people involved, we're not interested in those more sort of fringy things. We're interested in, bringing home food. And that includes, our earlier discussions about achievement, but also bringing it home to our kids and filling our freezers with delicious food. And that stuff is rock solid. You're not going to get that taken away. Could you imagine? It's just kind of, to me, kind of absurd to imagine a scenario where, it almost sounds like some sort of quacky conspiracy theory that, the lefties, the animal huggers, are going to take away our right to kill deer and moose and stuff like that based on values. I mean, come on, it's to me, it's just so inconceivable. But that being said, some of the more fringy stuff that the moral calculus doesn't appeal to the non-hunting community, there's reasons to think that this is going to change. But sure. The bread and butter, so to speak, the bringing food home, I think that's pretty rock solid.
I gotcha.
You probably agree. I don't know, what's your thought?
I do agree. And as I hear you say that, I'm glad to hear you think that they're never coming for that, because that is interesting. But there's so many elements to that for me. And coming up in the hunting industry, I was always kind of told, well, hunting is on the downslope. And as you said, every time I read
which it is, yeah.
I read a responsive management study in 2011 and 2016, and it is. And so you're kind of told, oh, well, this is a thing that we have to promote. We got to build. We got to build a coalition. We have R3. We have all these things that we have to do to grow this. And I think these conversations, whether somebody like Clay would agree or disagree with what you're saying, are the understandings that will help us, fortify more than anything. And so,
I completely agree. A more thoughtful approach. Yep.
Yeah.
I completely agree, Ben. Yep.
Well, Chris, I got to run. We got other podcasters need to use the studio.
Sure, man.
But man, this could go for another hour. I kind of want it to. So maybe we'll have you back at some time and keep doing what you're doing. Like I said, hopefully in our communities we can have these conversations where we might disagree, or at least we're exploring things that we have yet to consider, or people around us do not like. So I enjoy it, and I appreciate your openness to do it.
Likewise, Ben, I appreciate your process and having this conversation. It's a real good thing, and had a lot of fun, and happy to do it again.
All right, Chris, appreciate it, and we'll talk soon.
You bet, Ben. Take care.
See ya. That's it. That's all. Another episode in the books. Phil, you feeling? I'm just checking back in with you. What's your emotional state at this moment?
Pretty neutral, but I'll tell you what I am doing. I'm looking at the hunter safety courses online right now. I'm trying to figure it out.
When Yanni was here last episode, he challenged Phil and I, like, what's the plan? What's the first hunt? And we both said, we're kind of just drawing this out for the jokes. So now the pressure, maybe Phil's feeling a little social pressure from Giannis.
Yanni's been tough on me. Some tough love.
Yanni's tough on. Yanni gives you the tough love. If you're not getting
gators,
it right,
get your safety course done.
Get it together.
He's wondering why I'm waiting, and I don't have a good answer.
No good answer. No. So the first step is to get that hunter safety course going.
That's right.
You feel like you pass it? I'll help you. Or should I help you? I probably shouldn't help you that way.
No, I'm going to be a Mr. Independent.
All right. Well, man, we've talked a lot about predators since earlier in July. We're kind of inching toward actual hunting season here. We're pretty much there. And so we're not going to leave the predator topic behind. We'll continue to talk about it as much as it pertains. But I feel like we've explored it. Phil, you feel like we've explored it as we talked to Dr. Staler. We talked to Ivan Di Arajo. I talked to him later and got the right pronunciation of that. Nailed that.
Awesome.
Woo! We talked to Val Geist, and now we talked to both Barrie K. Gilbert and Chris Darimont about those issues. So the idea here, amongst all the jokes and the poop stories and things like that, is to try to paint a picture of these very smart, very well-studied individuals who all have very nuanced, complex opinions that have moving parts. And so I think that in and of itself paints a larger picture of the issue that we're dealing with predators on our landscape. And so it's something that hopefully, if you're looking for one answer, you're not going to get it. But certainly you have hours of conversation to listen to from people that are very important, very well read, and very well studied on the subject, which hopefully that can lead you to be as well through maybe osmosis or through THC. So next week, 141, we're going to get into Troy Landry, Jacob Landry, Louisiana. You're going to love it. And then after that, it's going to be elk talk. Remy Warren. We're going to get into the mind of an elk. We're going to get into hunting season full bore. A lot of cool stuff coming. THC. Say bye, Phil. Goodbye.
Too long, 'cause I can't go a week without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Drinking in heaven.
You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.